This is the Sales Bible Podcast, episode 275, Unleaking Sales Productivity, an interview with Todd Snyder.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And at this time, I am probably in Germany. Just spent a few days before that in Paris. But I can't really tell you how it was because I'm recording this in the far past. So I'm certain it was a lovely time and we had a ton of fun. But right now, I'm visiting my son and his wife in Germany, in Vilseck, Germany, down in southern Bavaria. But enough about that. Let's talk about today's episode. Our guest is Todd Snyder. He's a licensed psychologist, and he works as a peak productivity coach for business owners and executives. And he likes to focus on the inner game of productivity and help business owners take back control of their time. As a sales professional, you know what it's like to be easily distracted, and it's something that he calls productivity leaks. This is what we talk about and how to plug those leaks. Before we get to the interview, though, I would appreciate if you could take a moment, if you haven't done so already, to complete my habanero.community research study. As I've mentioned before, it is a matchmaking mastermind group for sales professionals, and I'm trying to figure out whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. If you could fill out that study, it'll only take 2 minutes, I promise, and you can find that in the show notes at habanero.community/study, and that's that. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Todd. You ready to babble?
Yes.
Todd, you're a productivity expert, right?
Right.
And that's why a buddy of mine, Rick Carlino, introduced the two of us because he mentioned that you're a licensed clinical psychologist and you've actually got a doctorate from Baylor. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
And you're what's called a peak productivity coach. You know, usually I want to talk about something like this at the beginning of the year, you know, New Year's resolutions, let's get fit, let's get lean, let's build a new program in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for somebody like you last year, or earlier the year, but I couldn't. But here you are now, and I think productivity is still a terrific topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for me, it always strikes me as odd when I hear people talking about New Year's resolutions, because to me, it seems like if there was something you cared about and wanted to change in your life, why in the world would you wait until New Year's? Why would you let the calendar dictate when you're going to start having improvements in your life? But that's the judgmental side of me. The other side of me is like, oh, well, anything that moves people in the right direction is good, even if it's a calendar year that's just mentally associated with setting new goals.
Oh, look, it's the third Tuesday of the month. This is a good time to start up some new habits.
Exactly.
Right, you're just looking for an excuse would be my thing. Mm-hmm. But let's talk some about productivity. And some people want to be more productive, but sometimes I even look at this and go, is productivity really the goal? Why do you think this is an important subject?
Well, I guess that depends on how you define productivity. And to me, really, productivity is about creating meaningful outcomes and doing so quickly. So the quickly part might be where people argue that, well, a balanced life isn't always going to have, rapid outcomes on everything. To some degree, you have to flow with life, and you can't necessarily control all the variables that are going to impact whether or not you reach outcomes that really matter to you. But my bias on this topic is that we have a certain amount of power in this life, and you should use it. You should use it all out for the things you care about. Whether you're on the last chapter of your life and it's about adding meaning and values for other people, for the generations, younger generations that you're leaving behind, or if you're just at the beginning of your life and trying to create some sort of sense of progress or meaning or purpose for yourself, productivity is about meaningful outcomes. So I guess if you want to live a life with meaning, then I would argue productivity probably is something that you should consider and you should look at. You should ask yourself, am I living a life that is conducive to producing meaningful outcomes quickly? Or do I end up getting swayed this way and that, and have my attention pulled in so many directions that nothing really happens of any substance.
Or sometimes you have the opposite issue where some people don't really have a direction. They're not really certain where they're going, what they're about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you thinking about that? That not having any direction, in terms of, are you thinking, okay, so that person needs to have a direction first before they start trying to be productive?
It
What are
kind
you
of,
thinking?
yeah, it kind of goes to what you're saying before, that it's really tied more into meaning. That a successful life is a meaningful life, and
Yeah.
to a certain degree, we can't help but make meaning in our lives. But I think some people just really struggle with, well, what should I do? These are people I consult with all the time. They have this product they'd like to roll out, but how to go about it, they have no idea. Haven't really thought about it. They've been floundering trying to find that right path. And some people, interestingly enough, it seems like they flounder their entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is. It's a little sad to me to see some people just floundering. Although, one thing I've learned as a psychologist is that we are all very different on the inside. You look at the different varieties of how people appear on the outside, that phenotype, as they say. You could even have the same genotype, meaning your genetic codes, like, for example, identical twins, the same, but the phenotype, the actual expression, the outward appearance can be so different. And, there's all kinds of different shapes and sizes of people, but man, that is nothing compared to the difference on the inside. This is something that, fresh out of my doctoral degree, I began to just be amazed how different people are. And one of those differences that I've seen is that some people don't have a strong need for creating or getting somewhere. They're just kind of here. They exist, and neurologically, they're just wired a little differently. And there's others of us who would be horrified by the idea of getting to the end of our life, looking back and discovering that I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't do anything. And our sense of well-being is very much tied to our having worked towards something meaningful, whether it's a legacy that goes on beyond our life, or whether it's just having had a lot of cool experiences with people we care about.
I think the audience here are all salespeople, and these people usually are very goal-driven. In the sales business, there's so many things you can do. You can always follow up with somebody another time. Mm-hmm. You can always do it one more try to see if you can kind of get on their radar and try to get that appointment. So maybe we could talk some about your advice on things that people can do to boost their productivity. And the things that you shared with me, you had this whole notion of the 5 attention leaks. What are these?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. A lot of people, when they think of productivity, they're thinking about time management. And unfortunately, time management is not the best approach to being more productive, because if you look at most people's schedules and you say, okay, we're going to manage your time, it gets confusing fast how that really equates to, say, more sales leads booked, more, sales closed, or more product delivered. Yeah, those kinds of connections are hard for people to make sometimes. But if you start looking at attention, so really when you look at productivity, there's only 3 ways to improve your productivity. And that is to upgrade your time management, your energy, or your attention. So improving your time, energy, and attention, those are the only 3 things you can really do.
Intention. Attention. Attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And attention and intention are very linked. What you intend to pay your attention to obviously is going to have a profound difference. But when most people think about productivity, they immediately think of time management. But what they forget about is the attention aspect. So the more productivity has been studied academically, the more apparent it's become that just because you're sitting at your desk with the intention of making progress, and so you've allocated the time for it, that doesn't mean you're really being as productive as you could. Some of the research on flow states, for example, has shown just tremendous increases, up to 400% in productivity when you're in a flow state. Meaning you're in that you're just in the zone where you become almost less aware of time passing. You're actively engaged in trying to make progress. And it typically comes with a feeling of well-being. Some people describe it as happiness. Others just kind of a sense of a positive emotional energy. And when you're in that flow state, for example, your attention to the task you're working on is far, far greater. And attention leaks, this concept I've talked about, is your attention is leaking and you don't even realize it. It's because we live in a world now where your attention is getting pulled in all different directions, and very often on purpose by people who have studied the craft of grabbing your attention, stealing it, and pulling you down a rabbit hole that you only emerge from hours later with a sense of frustration that you didn't achieve what you set out to achieve when you sat down at your desk or got on the call to do something, to accomplish something. So, yeah, tell me, do you have other specific questions about attention leaks?
Yeah, I
Or
think.
should I just
Yeah, and
press on here?
I think that's what's so confusing about our lives these days is that all of these tools have supposedly made it easier for us to do things like stay on top of our families and and to get our message out to prospective clients and to keep track of all the things that we're doing with our existing clients, all these tools. But they're just constantly, all these notifications are popping up, and it's constantly, it's very difficult for us to stay focused on any one thing. So we're time slicing from one to another to another to another.
Yes.
And it seems like you've done a lot at the end of the day. You're certainly exhausted. But not a lot has gotten done. Certainly not the things that you thought you wanted to get done at the beginning of the morning.
Right. Yeah. Cal Newport has written about this extensively, and in his newest book, Digital Minimalism, he talks about this concept that I think is very similar to what you're getting at, that we have so many different devices and apps pinging our attention that we've come to a place where we're never really alone anymore. And this is a unique phenomenon that mankind has never faced before, and it's a threat to your sense of well-being that you never have alone time. Because if you carry a cell phone with you and your boss or your colleagues or your clients can get a hold of you while you're standing in line at the grocery store, well, even then, I suppose you're not alone. But there's many people who have achieved a sense of aloneness walking through a crowded airport, because you're socially, in your social circle, you're sort of alone there, even if there's people around that you could interact with if you wanted to. But that's gone. There's constantly people waiting for you to like their Facebook post, whether it's your niece who posted a new picture of her cute puppy, or whether it's emails to get back to for work, or any sort of LinkedIn, or there's just this endless Slack messaging for a lot of the business owners that I've worked with who use Slack extensively with their own teams.
Yeah,
they have it on all day.
I do myself. In fact, and I'm like 4 different Slack threads too, or channels, and it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're not aware of this, probably most of your listeners are, but it seems like nothing when your attention just momentarily flips over to check somebody's message, but the disruption to your flow state, to your ability to attend to what you meant to accomplish, is huge. And the research on this shows that it's sometimes 15 minutes before you're really back fully up to speed where you left off. Some people argue 25 minutes. I find that probably depends on the nature of your work. If you're writing a novel, that might be the case. Probably a little bit less so for someone who's doing computer coding or sales work. But still, the impact on your attention and the quality of the attention that you're bringing to any task is going to be significantly diminished when your attention is being split, meaning some part of your mind is still processing what just happened socially in an interaction that you had, whether or not you responded to that person.
It's pretty brutal. Like I've turned off a lot of notifications on my phone. I mean, I hardly ever log in. I hardly look at Facebook anymore. I haven't looked at Twitter for quite a while. So what recommendations do you have for sales folks like us who are just overwhelmed with all of this, and yet at the same time, there's some things we really want to get done? What advice do you have for us?
Well, I think that it helps if you're really honest with yourself to start with and admit that there is a cost. There's the fear of missing out, which is huge, that impacts us all. And there's this feeling like if I don't stay up to date on the emails that are coming in for my industry, for example, I'm going to get behind and then I won't really be up to speed. There's also the cost where, people are used to seeing me as this person who always gets back to them within an hour, and I'm going to lose that. If you're realistic with yourself and you look at all of those cons, they just add up to very little compared to the pros, the tremendous leap forward that you can make when you improve your productivity, when you increase the amount of your attention focused like a laser on the things that really are going to matter to you at the end of this next month or 6 months from now. And so when you start this process, I'd say be honest with yourself, become willing to pay the price, because that's the first hurdle, you want to overcome. You want to say to yourself, I do recognize that my mind is a little split on this. There's a part of me that wants to be, have my attention pulled away from the difficult tasks that, are going to really move me forward, that take a lot of attention and concentration. So first, just come to grips with that, and then determine what are you willing to part with in order to increase your productivity. And for that to happen well, psychologically, you want to motivate yourself by taking into consideration what are the pros. Really, slow down and spend just a few minutes thinking what would happen if I turned off enough notifications to increase my focus. What would that mean? What would I focus on? And this is where this is a similar thing to where a lot of people fail with efforts like weight loss or quitting smoking or difficult things, is that they focus a lot on what do I not eat, or when should I stop smoking. They fail to put enough attention onto the benefits, like visualizing what it feels like to walk out of your house feeling like your body represents the sort of trim version of yourself you want. You need that visualization, because otherwise the brain is designed for temporal discounting, is what psychologists call it. It's this tendency we have to discount the importance of things that are in the distant future. So if I make a dental appointment and I'm terrified of pain, for example, if you tell me, we can make an appointment for you in 2 months, I'm much more likely to say, okay, sure, I'll do it. Than if you say, we have an appointment for you tomorrow if you can get in. I'm much more likely in that case to say, let me think about it. And it's the same way with the positive side. If you say to yourself, theoretically, there's some benefits to being more productive. It's just not very strong, because it's just sort of this distant theoretical, maybe I could one day next year become more productive. But if instead you say to yourself, what if over the next 7 days, I really just dove in and accomplished, and then you list out, what would be a meaningful accomplishment. And this brings us back to the question you first asked, I think, which is, well, how do you define productivity? It's something that's meaningful to you. Does that answer your question at all, as far as how to start and how to come to grips with why, sort of the motivation before you even start deciding which things to turn off that are pinging for your attention?
It does. It almost seems almost 12-step-ish. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at here. You said first, be honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. Number 2, be willing to make a list of things that you're willing to part with. Number 3, do this benefits visualization and really kind of embrace, the reason that you're doing it, the carrot, not just some stick. And then the 4th thing you said was to dive in. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could tell us more about that.
Mm-hmm. So when you dive in, you want to be able to have a really rich vision of the future, what you're creating. So I would say don't dive in until you have made the decision about, here are the things that are going to make a difference to me. So if you're in sales, and I'm sure you guys in sales have very sophisticated mental models of, this is what this is the good way to define productivity. And maybe it's, I made 20 calls today, or I don't know what a good number is, but if you made 20 calls today and you say that is productivity, because I know that out of those 20 calls I'm going to get 5 maybes and 2 yeses, and those 2 yeses are going to translate to the sort of progress that I need. Whatever the scenario is, if you have a really clear vision of the future, you're much more likely to, because of that, to be able to define the steps you're going to need to be able to take to be productive. So I like Michio Kaku's definition of intelligence. As a psychologist, I went through years of training on various IQ tests and different things, different ways, different theories for how you measure human intelligence. And despite all that, my very favorite one was one I never learned in grad school. It's one I learned from Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist who is in popular media a lot. And in his book, what was it called? Oh, The Future of the Mind. He talks about intelligence. He says, in his view, intelligence is best defined as the ability to get what you want. And when I heard that, I thought, that is genius, because it's like it throws out all of these complex things about, creative intelligence versus, mathematical, the ability to develop crystallized intelligence, which is, just knowledge, vocab words and stuff, versus fluid intelligence, the ability to just think on your feet as you perceive new problems. And it brings it all down to, can you get what you want? And so you could be a dropout of high school thief robbing a bank, and if you're capable of projecting your mind into the future well enough in advance that you can predict where the cops are going to be, who's going to go where, and exactly how to evade them, then theoretically you could be a very intelligent person who's able to get what you want by getting away with the money, even it's kind of an antisocial example. But the notion is interesting. So if you think about how do we apply that to this concept of productivity, well, it's creating meaningful outcomes quickly rather than slowly. In other words, accomplishing stuff you want fast. And so it's not normal for the human mind to do that. It's normal for the human mind to gravitate towards low energy activities, things that don't require a lot of mental effort or difficulty. I don't know if you guys who are salesmen struggle with this a lot, like a lot of other people I know, but for a lot of people, they're getting on the phone and trying to sell something is like their worst nightmare. It's just so difficult. Like, how could I get myself to do that? Now, I would imagine most people who are in sales have long ago overcome that sort of inhibition and realized what I'm really doing is I'm a consultant. I'm helping people realize what's best for them. But that would actually be a great example of the kind of thing for, I'm thinking of one real estate agent who was just getting started that hired me as sort of a peak performance coach before I even really was focused on productivity many years ago. And that was his hang up at the time, was, sort of this battle inside of, do I even want to get on the call? It's like, I hate hearing no, and I always feel bad when I hear no. And we got into this discussion about Tony Robbins, the motivational coach. Right. Hey, what you've got to do is you've got to, hit your quota of no's, because if you get a certain number of no's, that means you're essentially succeeding, because you're moving towards the yes. Every no you get is one step closer to yes. So if you can really think about, well, what is it what's the meaningful outcome that I need to achieve? And that's what we did with this real estate agent. We went through the mental visualization of, this is where I want to get to. Then we moved backwards, almost sort of like a critical path analysis, if you're familiar with that, to say, okay, in order to get to the end goal, and we work backwards, what has to happen? And it became very clear, and it increases his motivation. Now this is where you ask yourself, what attention splitting or attention hijacking events are likely to happen tomorrow when you start trying to implement this plan? And that's where looking into the future, being able to have a rich mental map of how your own mind works and how you respond to attention leaks, these things that hijack your ability to really focus on the steps that matter. That's where this comes into play. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all, but that's the process I would take you through if you asked me to. So.
How can people find you online, Todd?
Well, you could go to toddsnydercoaching.com, Snyder spelled with a Y. And if you just look for Todd Snyder, you'll find the clothing line. And then I think there's a country singer as well that shares my name. But toddsnydercoaching.com is probably the quickest, easiest way to find me and read some of the things that I write about.
And you had an info. What do you call those things? Info.
Oh yeah.
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, it's just I have a quick PDF document that's just a quick reference for people who are just starting to think about this attention leaks concept, and I've just sort of captured the 5 most important ones that in my experience, if you can plug these 5 leaks, you can literally start saving an hour or 2 hours per day by tomorrow. And so I just have a download that's available at toddsnydercoaching.com / I've put it at / sales babble for your listeners if they're interested in downloading that or just taking a quick peek at it.
Sounds good. Sounds very good. Todd, again, I really appreciate you coming here and babbling with us here on Sales Babble.
It's been my pleasure.
Really enjoyed talking to Todd about this topic. It's one that I struggle with myself all the time because it's really important that we focus like a laser on your attention and that you plan that any new task that you're going to do, it's probably going to take time and energy. While you're doing it, you're going to be enticed to not work on your goals, and that's a part of human nature, to be distracted. So instead of beating yourself up, consider the pros and the possibilities that if you achieve your goals, what could happen. Use that opportunity to fuel new and better behaviors and to boost your sales productivity. To connect with Todd, you can find him and the links that he mentioned in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/275. If you got a question or a comment, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. You can find me at salesbabble.com/the Babble Me button. Even though I am abroad, I am checking my email. I'll be keeping up on it. Don't forget to complete the habanero.community study. You're wondering, why does he keep talking about this? I really need your data, folks. I'm trying to get a statistically significant number in it before I make any kinds of decisions. If you could help me, I'd appreciate it. With that said, that's all I got for today. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.